I am Mary Sketch with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition, and I am for the soil to protect the landscapes, waterways, and resources that provide the food that we all eat and the lands that we recreate on for current and future generations.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Ishii, your host for the Soil, a conversation, and we certainly appreciate you tuning in for this podcast, this episode of the podcast. And, we're going to be going out into a field. There's one thing about doing things in a studio or an office environment, but I particularly like to get out in the field, talk with farmers, talk with gardeners, talk with people who are involved hands-on, so to speak, with soil health. And today we're going to be going out into the field to a farm in Rockingham County, Virginia. That'll be coming up in just a moment, but I would like to remind everyone that our website will be undergoing a significant update in coming weeks, and we invite you to check out that website. There's a lot of resources there. There's information about the 4 core principles of soil health. There's, of course, a library of these podcasts. There's a blog. There's a good way to make a commitment to soil health by taking the pledge. We encourage you to do that. That's all at the website, forthesoil.org. That is the digit 4, thesoil.org. Well, let's now go out to the field in Rockingham County and get this podcast started. Welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Joining us today, we have a very special guest, and Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension. Could you introduce that guest?
Yes, Jeff, we're very pleased to have Lydia Fitzgerald with us here. We're out at a field day at Mike Phillips and Farm, and Lydia is an integrated cropland agronomist who works very closely with Virginia Tech and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Services in promoting and educating about soil health. So we're glad to have Lydia with us.
Well, Lydia, if you would, tell us about your exhibit that you have here, about NRCS exhibit.
Yeah, so I'm out here today at this event to demonstrate some of the soil health principles with a slaking demonstration and an infiltration demonstration. So pretty much what we're going to be doing is taking 2 different soils. They were actually right beside each other in a field, but one field has been tilled continuously for the past 30 years. So picture that one soil that's just been tilled, beaten, no continuous cover, no cover crops there. And then right beside it, there's actually a warm season grass plot that has continuous perennial coverage there, perennial grasses there that have a really great rooting system there holding all the soil together. And so we have these 2 separate soils, and what we're pretty much going to do is drop them in a clear cylinder, and there's a little net in there kind of to hold them, and then we see how they break apart in the water over time. And what we're hoping to see out here in a little bit is we'll see, the tilled soil doesn't have those biotic glues. It's going to break right down, crumble into pieces, dissolve in the water pretty much. And the soil that has been, managed utilizing those 4 soil health principles is going to be held together by, the different roots, the biotic glues. Really, it's the soil life that's producing, the materials that are just holding together that soil. And we'll see that it won't, it's not going to fall apart nearly as much as the other soil. It has, kind of that resilience that we talk about. So it's kind of just being able to visualize that and see that out here today is what we're hoping to see. So
in just one generation, you think about from the 60s and 70s to the modern day, we have seen an amazing change in soil management, and I think right off the bat of no-till. For our listeners who are not familiar with that terminology, what is no-till?
Well, typically, if you think about, you said generations ago, pretty much all of the cropland was tilled up, so the soil was pretty much broken with a plow, and then multiple passes were made over top of it to, prepare it for planting. Because when you're planting, getting that seed in the soil, having good soil contact around it, that's what helps it germinate and come up. And so, that's how they did that back then. was to plow up the soil to have that nice, good seed bed. And then now, though, we found that not tilling the soil is very beneficial, and it actually helps, build our soils, as you've heard. And so really the concept of no-till is to just leave it as it is and to not till it up to prepare the seed bed. But with, some of the advanced technologies and planters, and we've come a really long ways, now we're able to plant directly into that sod without disturbing it, which is pretty much the concept of no-till.
And we apologize if there's any wind noise because we're literally out standing in the field, aren't we, Eric? Yeah, we are. And we apologize if there's a little, and birds singing in the background. We're out here, people, in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley, Rockingham County, Virginia. And Eric, any questions?
Well, Lydia, I'd be interested in what inspired you as far as getting into this career of natural resource protection and soil conservation.
Yeah, so to talk about where that, came from, there's a few different sources of that. I'd say, 3 primarily. The first one being that I grew up in agriculture over the mountain in Nelson County. And so I grew up with that background of just, being out on the land and seeing how important it is to farmers, but also to everyone who eats and drives their car and just, living. We all depend on agriculture. And then the second thing is that when I was in high school, I was very involved in the Future Farmers of America program. And so, of course, I knew that I liked agriculture, but I was like, what can I actually do with that? And so being involved in FFA really opened those doors to help me just see the possibilities and the opportunities that there were in the field of, crop and soil science and agronomy. So I was able to pursue that educationally throughout college, and then ended up with NRCS in the Shenandoah Valley. And then now I'm here working for Virginia Tech and NRCS across the state in conservation agronomy. So it's always been my dream and my goal, and I'm very fortunate to be in this position because I love what I do.
Let's take a little field trip. Let's walk right over here. We're going to step over here a few minutes. There's some great demonstration plots here at the Mike and Susan Phillips farm in Rockingham County, Virginia. And right now, I think what we're seeing is a mixture of crop covers. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. There's a mixture here with some crimson clover. I wish you could see it. It's beautiful. It's blooming right now. There's actually 4 bees within my eyesight right now that I can see that are hovering over these beautiful crimson clover blooms. And then we have rye out here, and also some Austrian winter pea that Mike planted out here.
So this was probably planted when?
I believe Mike established this probably in September, it would be my guess.
Okay, it was after the previous crop, and the purpose is to cover the ground during the winter and the spring?
Yeah, so what Mike had planted here was corn for green, and so after they harvested that, he was able to come in and put in this cover crop because otherwise, if there was no cover crop, there wouldn't be anything planted here until, the next few weeks is when the crop would be going into the ground. And so if you think about that from September to, May, that's a long time to not have anything growing and anything, holding together the soil and covering the ground. So the cover crop's here to help provide that when there's not an active crop growing. But we like to think about the cover crop as a crop itself. And so there's still a crop here, and it's still doing a lot of good, even if he's not planning to harvest it and sell it.
And Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension, when you look at this demonstration plot, what do you see?
Well, I see diversity. I also see, different legumes that also provide nitrogen and can also capture nitrogen. But as Lydia pointed out, it's also providing pollinator habitat, and we know that honeybees are so important to crop production and provide so much benefit when we think about pollination. So, and then it's, we're able to see what's above ground right now, but with some of the demonstrations that we have here, we'll be exploring what's below ground as well. And there's more and more research on the relationship between bacteria and fungi and the whole soil food web. So it's really great to have a field day like this, to have such a hands-on experience.
I believe you had another question for Lydia.
Well, I was just, if you wanted to say more about, I think we're trying to promote, the integration of legumes like crimson clover and the Austrian pea, as well as more and more farmers are experimenting with brassicas as well.
Yeah, I would just say that from my experience, and of course it's limited, I've only been in this position for 8 months now, but part of my experience is that I get to work with a farmer mentoring program that we have. So I've been working with some of the guys that have been, utilizing cover crops for a while now, and what I see is that, every system is different, and, every farm and every, they might even change up what they're doing based on their needs. So really just trying to capture that idea of having, a really purposeful cover crop, depending on what the needs are. So that's why we can't go out and say everybody should plant crimson clover on their farms, because it really does depend on what your goals are. But if you're talking about, everybody's talking about right now fertilizer prices, and it's a legitimate concern. And so, if you have the option to be able to incorporate legumes into your cover crop, that'll provide, a nutrient benefit there and a nitrogen benefit in the next season. And one of the farmers I'm working with is actually doing some plots with Virginia Tech, looking at being able to reduce their amount of nitrogen they're putting on their cotton following a legume cover crop. And they've had really great results showing that they can put, half as much and still get just a good quality of yield.
Another thing we have to realize that a lot of our podcast subscribers, they're from all over, not just Virginia, but all over the region. And when you go from the eastern shore of Virginia to Nelson County, that's a whole different picture.
Yes, and I can say I've got to fully experience that, because the farmer I was just talking to you about is actually down in Wakefield. So they're out in the east part of the state, completely different system from up here at Mike's farm. And I've worked with Mike now for quite a few years and learned a lot from him. But, that's why I think the principles are so important, is because how Mike, how his management reflects those principles is different than how, the farmer in Wakefield does, because they have different climates, different soils, different crops. But those principles still hold true, even as you move across the state.
What about for backyard vegetable gardeners? Let's take this demonstration plot. Can you use a cover crop in a backyard garden?
So I actually have almost the same mix planted in the raised beds in my yard right now. So I have, a really small yard, but I have some raised beds there that I garden in, and I actually have some crimson clover and Austrian winter pea and rye growing in my raised beds right now. I'm getting ready to cut down.
And Lydia, you had mentioned about the Future Farmers of America, and we're fortunate enough to have many students here at this field day for a younger generation. What advice or counsel would you have in following their dreams?
Yeah, so like I said, the Future Farmers of America, that's how I kind of got my foot in the door and thinking about this as like a career, and not just I grew up on a farm and I like it. But this is, there's a science to it. There's a lot but more behind it than you might realize. And so I'll give the same advice that I give to my sister who's in high school right now and is getting involved in FFA, which is, if you're interested in something, compete in a contest, learn more about it. It's a prime opportunity to be able to learn a lot about a lot of really different things. And it's just a great opportunity to learn about them and figure out, what you're really interested in and what you're passionate about. So get involved, come out if you have the opportunity. Like I said, there's FFA kids out here right now, and it's a great opportunity for them to actually be out here and see what's going on, which, may help to inspire you to figure out, what you want to pursue.
Just a couple of minutes remaining in this episode of For the Soil, a conversation. What would be your advice to wannabe farmers? There's kind of a back to land movement going on, a lot due to COVID. People want to get back to sustainable lifestyles. How can they learn about soil health? Do you send them to YouTube? Do you send them to their extension office? Do you send them to NRCS?
I would say all of the above, but the first thing that popped into my mind when you said that was, reaching out. If you know of a local farmer, if you know of local farmers in your area, reach out to them and talk to them about what they're doing, what their challenges are, and get their advice on if you want to get started. And I can say that, working across the state with all of these great farmers, they want to see the agricultural community continue to, they want to see it grow, not shrink, because it's shrinking right now. They want to see it grow. And so, they're very willing to share their experiences and help you get started if you're interested.
Thank you both for being on this episode, this special Field Day episode, outdoors in Rockingham County, Virginia. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jeff. And again, thank you so much, Lydia, for what you do. And for promoting soil health and working with farmers for today and for future generations.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. It's been great.
And now we go to Dr. Rory McGuire at Virginia Tech with one of the 4 core principles of soil health.
Keeping the soil covered is very important in terms of preventing soil erosion. Soil erosion is one of the biggest ways to decrease soil quality. If you lose the soil, you're losing the valuable part of your land. So keeping the soil covered prevents soil erosion. And when raindrops directly impact the soil, they can form a crust on the soil surface. They actually break the soil structure right at the soil surface. And once the soil structure is broken at the surface, you don't get any infiltration of water anymore. And of course, if water doesn't infiltrate, it runs off. And when it runs off, it takes the soil with it. So keeping the soil covered is extremely important in terms of preventing surface crust formation and soil erosion.
Dr. Rory McGuire, soil scientist at Virginia Tech. Well, that is going to conclude this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. Would like to remind you that this podcast is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, just visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you should have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of Mr. Ruiz and Jackson F. Smith. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.